Peace to the family. Today I want to make a quick video about the recent court decision by the Supreme Court of the Muscogee Creek Nation in Oklahoma. And the decision, it pertains to freedmen with Indigenous American roots in the Muscogee Creek Nation. It's a big thing because it gives undeterred citizenship to descendants of the Muscogee Creek people that are on one of their last roll calls, right? But what was big to me is that it was covered by Roland Martin. No matter what people say about Roland Martin, and he's made some controversial proclamations, and he oftentimes has some ways that cater to the quote unquote the black elite. But he broadcast this decision on his show, and his show has a lot of viewership. I think on his State of the Black Nation, he had over 250,000 people viewed in at one particular moment. So for me, it gives greater exposure to people to know that African Americans have a lot of indigenous blood in them as well. Because at this point in the ball game, we don't know what to call ourselves, who we actually are. And it's a shame that you have to lead with your whole genealogy to have a conversation in this world of foundational Black American ADOs, descendants of African slaves, and the controversy with Pan-Africans, right? So that being said, it gives greater exposure to people who think that there's no such thing as quote unquote Black Indians, right? And this is because the generations have moved on, right? For me, my maternal grandmother had those real light eyes, right? Her grandmother, well, her mother, my great-grandmother, Mama Ruth, her mother, Missy Hunter, straight indigenous, you know what I'm saying? I got pictures of it, got pictures of her. Know her surname, which is Hunter, right? So that gives you an indication to what her people were doing. They were hunters, right? Not particularly sure of the exact band or nation. That's for me to do that study. But that's another thing about that court case, because some of the indigenous lines that we as a people go back to, a lot of them were left behind. And when I say left behind, I'm talking about during the period of the Trail of Tears. They were the remnant that remained in Appalachia, in Florida, North Carolina, all the way up to New York, right? Whereas a great degree of people went west to Oklahoma, Texas, even on to Mexico, right? Mexico, right? With that remnant that was still left in the East, those persons probably will not be on this master list that the Muscogee Creek Nation of Oklahoma have welcomed back into the tribe, right? And just off the cuff, Muscogee is a Muscogee County in Georgia, which is Columbus, Georgia, East Alabama, where my paternal side of the family comes from, right? Muscogee, Illinois. So you can see all of these bands of people, Muscogee, Muskegon, Wisconsin. There's a Muscogee in Wisconsin, right? Also in Oklahoma, of course, in Oklahoma. So these peoples were scattered about what will become the United States. At that point, it was just the Union, right? And it also revealed some facts about the Choctaw Nation fighting with the Confederacy. And why would they fight with the Confederacy? A lot of times it came down to either fight with them or fight them, period, right? And under duress, a lot of times the indigenous nations, they fought with or against the Union, or they fought with the Confederacy or against the Confederacy, right? A few years ago, by happenstance, I was in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and they had more indigenous soldiers in actual Gettysburg Cemetery proper than they had United States colored troops in the actual cemetery. They actually have a statue of a indigenous person in one of the areas in Gettysburg Cemetery. Whereas, I was lucky to come across one of 4 of the regulars, United States colored troops, in the actual cemetery. His brother's name is Charles Parker. His number is 115, right? But also in Gettysburg, there's a historic AME church on Breckenridge. I remember the street that it's on, but I can't rightfully remember the name of the actual AME church. So if anybody knows, put it in the comments. But there are hundreds, I would say hundreds of United States colored troops that are buried in these AME cemeteries in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, right? And a lot of times if you go back into those Methodist church with the names like Soldiers Memorial that were founded in the 1800s, their rosters go back to the 1800s. Soldiers Memorial was a testament to Union soldiers, right? So the whole notion of bellum history, antebellum history, and indigenous and African American participation in the quote-unquote Great War, the war for the Civil War, the war for the United States, has been hidden, right? When General Sherman was marching through Atlanta, he was burning everything, right? So he was burning the records of land rights, of people that were bought and sold. So part of that untold history is that they burned a lot of those records. And they continued to do this years later, that when people, they couldn't afford to be buried or whatever, they got all their contents, and they burned them as to not leave a trace to who they were and what they were, right? So all of this was by design. It was by design to erase the great stain on the quote-unquote so-called democracy, the great city on the hill, right? So now, circa 2025, you have millions of people of Indigenous or African descent that are literally confused on who they are, where they came from, what their place in this society is, and causing a big to-do about it. But whatever you think about Roland Martin, I'm appreciative that he showed this story on his digital network, so that other people might get some knowledge about the situation and do further study into the situation. Okay, I want to pivot back to my experience on 628 on top of Stone Mountain, Georgia, where brothers and sisters came together and went to the top of that landmark, that ancient landmark for indigenous people, right? There was a group of people up there who were, I don't want to say they were claiming it. Yeah, they did claim it, but they proposed the indigenous nature of so-called African American people or black people. Again, it's becoming problematic that we got to lead with our genealogy in order to distinguish who we are as people who live in North America, right? Or Northwest of Mexico, however you wanna name this land, right? But I shared a picture of my my great-great-grandmother with one of these individuals. And the first thing that the brother said, well, yeah, that's the lie of the transatlantic slave trade. It didn't exist. Yeah. I said, well, brother, hold tight. You know what I'm saying? Pump your brakes on that, brother. You know what I'm saying? We just talking about one particular matron on one side of my family. You know what I'm saying? Now let's talk about who she married. What was his nationality? Because there is a distinction between what I look like and what she looks like. I may have her eyes, but I also have the blood of African people in my bloodline, right? I don't deny the indigenous nature of a lot of so-called African American people. I know they get offended by that term African American, but that term African was used as early as the 1700s, right? When the first African Masonic body was formed by Prince Hall and the others. They were incorporated as the African Lodge, right? Also, you had the African Methodist Episcopal Church, by Absalom Jones and Richard Allen. So I'm sure they were acutely aware of their bloodlines as well. So that term African American, it does not begin with Jesse Jackson in terms of the late 1980s, right? Or even Afro-Americans in the 70s and the 60s, and before the Harlem Renaissance with the Black is Beautiful movement, all right? So what I'm saying is we're not a monolithic people, nor should we battle one another over what our genealogies look like. Our genealogies are as diverse as we are as a people, right? I also want to give credence to the notion that yes, we as a people were here before Columbus. From the Malian epic of Sundiata Keita, right? Sundiata, he was battling with Sumanguru, right? But Sundiata had a brother that he had commanded to sail, looking for these quote unquote 7 cities of gold before the Europeans, right? Even Estavinco was one of the persons that sailed out with Christopher Colon, right? Even to the point, the common name of the Caribbean before it was known as Sargasso, the Sargasso Sea, right? But being known as the Caribbean or Caribou. This is an Arabic term, Caribou. Caribou means welcome. Carib means near. Or Carib means relative as well. So just by the name of Caribbean, we can see that there is a link to what we now know as the continent of Africa and Africa proper, not being germane to just West Africa, but to all of Africa, right? The total of Africa. Stories are told about people walking across the world, right? And people sailing in ships that were, able to navigate transcontinentally to the east, where in Tonga, the people say that they came from the region known as Tanganyika, proper today known as Tanzania. Tanzania is what it's known as in Southern Africa, right? So, and that even brings into the fold the whole notion of Pangea, right? When all the earth was together, or if there was a cataclysmic disturbance that separated the continental plates, the tectonic plates of different nations, of different continents, based on underwater eruptions, or just some sort of cataclysmic event, So again, I hope that this small talk will encourage you to do some further study into the nature of the peoplings of the world and quote unquote North America specifically. One more thing I want to add is that years ago when I was a younger man, I think this may have been in the early 80s, on PBS, Public Broadcasting System, Georgia Public Broadcasting System, they were showing the whole nature of the DeSoto Trail in Florida and Ponce de Leon. And they show in the state archives of Florida what Ponce de Leon and DeSoto saw when they came to Florida, right? And they depicted these people as dark-skinned with woolly hair, right? This is before 1619. So they have these paintings in the state archives in Florida. And it's so ironic that the fight against education and the quote-unquote DEI wars, the what is it, critical race theory war, comes out of these places such as Florida and these Republican-held states, as to conceal the identity of the original peoples of the United States. And you can see why when you do further study, right? And that's not to minimize what is already known, right? So again, I hope that this small talk will press you to do some research into some of these subjects that, you know, they're being highly debated in these quote-unquote YouTube streets nowadays, right? But I would also admonish you to do some genealogical work for your family. I was blessed that my mother, she did our family tree when she was an undergraduate student at Indiana State University of Evansville, which is on the Ohio River and probably about 20 miles from an ancient Mississippian mound in Newburgh, Indiana, called Angel Mounds, right? My mother did it down to the earlobes, where the earlobes were attached or were they unattached. So in all of this, you know, do some work on your family. Get your family's understanding of some things, right? Like for me, I have a daughter. I have a daughter with an African woman. But I sat up and I held that picture of my daughter to my grandmother. And I thought about, boy, reincarnated souls. That's what we are. You know, as far as that DNA sequence is concerned, either you going or you coming. And I looked at my baby and I said, whoa, this is my grandmother. You know, this is, she holds the DNA, what we would know as mitochondrial DNA, that mRNA, which comes from the maternal side. But again, don't get caught up in this this fight for supremacy of terms, and do your own due diligence. Do the book knowledge, do the blood knowledge, and you know, and then, you know, advance it on to the you know, if that's all you can do is do it through the internet, do it through AI or whatever, you know, that's a start as well. But sit down and meditate with yourself. Talk to the elders in your family and get a proper understanding of what's really happening, what's really going on. You know, and you will see that, you know, the ties that bind us are so much stronger than these straw man arguments that seek to divide us. With that, I say peace. Like, subscribe, and add on if you haven't already subscribed to the station. I surely appreciate it, man, and it makes me feel good to share my story and share my opinion. You know, I welcome yours in the comments, but hey, let's keep it respectful, all right? Because we are just one blood. Peace.